Whoa, do you need shocks and struts for your vehicle? In this video, I'm going to show you what to look for. A lot of times you're going to find that it's not so much something you're listening for, but something that is giving you a sensation when you're going over bumps. You feel like a vibration, whether it's a vibration in the car or you feel it in the steering, something doesn't feel right. Something definitely doesn't feel right in this car. Check these out. We've got a shock and a strut. We got these from oneaauto.com. In the video, we're going to show you what to look for if you need new shocks and struts. If you need parts for your vehicle, click the link in the description and head over to oneaauto.com. Let's take a visual look at the strut on the front of this vehicle. This is pretty typical of a common strut. You have the spring, you have the strut in the middle there, you have a boot right here, there's a little bumper in there, and then you have it coming down to the knuckle, and it's attached to the knuckle. And when you turn the wheel, this is going to pivot back and forth. Now, some things you want to look at, whether you're going to need new shocks or struts. If you see any damage to the body at all, if you see anywhere where there's been an object that's hit it, whether it's been a rock or some other type of damage, then it's going to need to be replaced. It's not going to be doing its job properly. If you look underneath the boot, you can see where the shaft is that goes into the strut right there. And if any dirt and debris get on there, that could cause some leaks. If you see any fluid leaks, that's a good indication that you're going to need shocks or struts. If you see any fluid leaking down, that's not good. They got to be replaced. Check in the body of the strut or shock for any physical damage. If a rock severely hit it and there's a good sized dent in it, that's not going to be good. Or anything where the shock or strut is bent, then maybe you hit a bump too hard, maybe other suspension components are worn, causing the shock or strut to wear out faster. You want to take a look at the spring, see if there's any cracks in the spring. A lot of times the springs will crack closer to the strut base or up near the strut mount, near the corners. So you can grab the spring, just be careful, you don't want to get your fingers caught, and just see if there's any cracks in it. Now, if you have a cracked or broken spring, it's going to make a different type of noise. When we're looking at shocks in the rear, it's a little bit different than the struts. Just pretty similar, just no spring around the outside of it. You'll have the boot that goes over the top. That's going to prevent some dust and debris getting into the top part of the shock. And then the body of the shock, you can see this one's extremely rusted. And it may still be doing its job, but eventually that rust is going to penetrate and it will start leaking. So this is a good time to replace these shocks. And here's a good indication of a bad shock and strut, that you can visually see the oil dripping right out of it. And sometimes you may even see oil dripping on the ground. You may wonder where it's coming from, if you think it's coming from your brakes or other components, but this is obviously bad. And if you neglect to replace this, you're going to cause other front end or rear end components, rear suspension issues. You could even cause cracks and springs to happen, and you're going to wear out your tires. Something else that can make some noise is the bushings. If the bushings are severely worn or dry rotting and cracking, or even if they're non-existent, the shock will just bounce around in there and you're going to get a rattling type noise. Just to give a quick recap of what you're looking for visually is you don't want any leaks, you don't want any excessive rust buildup where it's actually flaking off, you don't want any dings or dents, and you definitely don't want anything that's bent or any of the bushings worn to the point where they're not working properly. Another indication you have bad shocks or struts is your tires. Take a look at the tread. If they're wearing unevenly or they're chopping extremely bad, when the vehicle bounces a lot, it's going to cause more wear on the tire. The shock's not doing its job by absorbing the vibrations, and it goes all into the tire. You're going to spend more money on tires. Might as well just get some shocks and struts. Now let's get into it and replace them. For the most part, these struts are going to be removed pretty similar on most vehicles. You're going to have maybe a link that's connected to them. You're going to have a couple bolts at the base, and then you're going to have the mount at the top with bolts or nuts holding that on. I'm going to start by taking the link off, find the right socket that works for that, loosen it up, and then I'm going to use a wrench on the back side to prevent the stud from spinning. Sometimes it's a little tricky to get in behind here. You can also use locking pliers. That's always good. Remove the nut. Slide the link out, set that aside. And if you have any brackets that are holding on some brake lines or a wheel speed sensor, you want to take that off. And there should be a bolt right there, but it looks like it's just hanging out on here. So I'm going to take these other bolts out. Now I'll take these nuts off. Take a hammer, tap the bolts out. Those bolts out, you can separate the knuckle. You want to make sure that the knuckle doesn't tip forward too much because you could ruin the CV boot. It could pop out, and also the hose for the brakes. You don't want to put too much tension on that hose. If you have to, you can use a bungee cord. Just wrap it around here. Find a place to hold it so it's going more in than falling out. But this seems like it's okay, just like this. Now everything's disattached or unattached from the strut. We can go up top and disconnect it from up top. And you want to find the nuts and bolts from the top part of where the strut tower is. And we see we have bolts on this one. There's a nut right in the center there. For this vehicle particularly, you don't want to take that off at this time. So we'll take those bolts out, just get the right size socket. And when I go to take the last one out, I want to grab underneath and support the spring. Now I can pull this bolt out. Now I'm going to slide this down and slide the top out, just like that. If we're just going to replace the strut itself or the upper strut mount, we're going to want to use a tool like this to compress the spring. Although this being not a passenger car, it's more of an SUV or a truck, these aren't really going to cut it. These are somewhat dangerous. You could try to do it and just see how it goes, but for the most part, you don't really want to use these. So we're going to use this machine. It's a lot safer. We can lock the strut in there. Locked in there good. Now just make sure everything's straight up and down. All right, that's good. Now we can't twist anything. What we're going to do is compress this. This is going to compress the spring so that the strut and the upper mount is loose. I'm going to stand over here on this side. You know when it's loose enough when you can grab the strut and just spin it like that. You don't really have to compress it to its full amount. So that's pretty good right there. Now they make special sockets for the nut right here where you could put the socket on and then you have the ability to put another socket over the center shaft of the strut to keep it from spinning. You can take it out that way. If you don't have that, what you can do, push this down, push the boot down so that you can access the top of the strut. Grab some locking pliers. And if you're way at the top, it's not going to cause any damage if you had to reuse the strut, because it's never going to compress down to the point of the seal, so that'll be okay. It's going to prevent that from spinning. And just take a socket and take the nut off. Here's the nut. Here's the mount. You can pull that off. If you can see, there's a bearing in here. And you can see it's just binding up, just like that. This is separated. There should be some balls in there, and they're not in there. They've all fallen out. There's been corrosion in there. So the seal has been bad in here. So at this point, this whole upper strut assembly needs to be replaced. And you can grab the strut, and at this point you could compress it and just grab it and see if there's any noise. There could be some noise going on in there, and that's the noise that you hear out on the road. Take this boot off completely. And sometimes you won't, if you compress this and it's extremely easy, then it's not going to be good. With a bad strut, also, if the shaft goes down and doesn't return, then it's obviously not good. It should, when you compress it, it should return. So we're going to need a strut mount, a new strut. The spring's not looking so good, and the boot is a little worn. It's a little old, starting to dry rot. So we could replace these components separately, but it is a lot more time consuming, and you need a fairly expensive machine to do this properly and safely. We're just going to replace the entire assembly. It comes with the strut, the spring, the boot, and the upper strut mount. Now, we sell these at 1aauto.com. If you need struts or shocks for your vehicle, you can click the link in the description and it'll bring you to 1aauto.com. So we're just going to install this the same way it came out. Just line the holes up top. Line the bolt up. Once you get one bolt, you can let go of it. All right, we'll get the rest of these started. All right, so those are all loose. You get a good amount of threads on there, probably about a ½ inch of thread left. I'm going to leave this loose, then it's going to be easier to install down below. And just slide the knuckle into place. Take the bolts, get the bolts started. Get the other bolt started. Give it a couple taps. And put the nuts on. We can tighten those down. Make sure you don't pinch anything while you're doing this. Put that bracket on. That wasn't attached before. It's okay. Snug that down. Slide this link in position. Put the nut on. the wrench on there and tighten this down. And we can tighten these down. Let's replace the shock. The shock is not going to have the spring around it. It's going to be supporting the lower control arm. So we need to use some type of support, whether it's a floor jack or a screw jack. At this point, now I can take these bolts out. Might have to adjust that, adjust the screw jack, and then up top, take this bolt out. There we go. Then we can compress the shock a little bit. And slide it out. Normally shocks are pretty easy to replace. They're normally just 2 bolts holding them in. You can check out the bushings and you can see that they're rubber, and then there's a steel sleeve through the center of them. And if they're dry rotting, and sometimes they're crumbling, they're gonna rot over time. So that's a good thing to check out. You can do the same on this side. Looks a little bit different, but the same idea. And then let's inspect them. If you compress them the same way we did the strut, and you can see if they make noise. If you're compressing them, they could be squeaking or making some type of rattling noise. The internals could be bad, not doing what it's supposed to be doing. And if you compress them and they just stay compressed, then that's not good either. When we get our new shock, we want to get the oil moving around, get the valves moving. So we're going to compress it completely and then let it extend 3 times before we install it in the vehicle. You can definitely feel a difference on the second time it goes down. The oil's moving throughout the inside of the shock. And that's working properly. Now we're going to install it the same way it came out. Slide it in position. And if you need shocks like this for your vehicle, you can get these at 1aauto.com also. Again, just click the link in the description. Put the bolt in. Get that one started. Now it's lined up down below. Now I just got to raise the lower control arm. Just use the jack or the screw jack. I'll snug these up. All right, no more squeaks and rattles over bumps, no more grinding when turning the wheel back and forth, and no excessive bouncing. We fixed this up, and now you know what to look for if you have bad shocks or struts. If you enjoyed this video and it helped you out, make sure you subscribe to our channel, ring the bell, turn on all notifications so you don't miss any of our videos. We talked about before.
I don't remember.
Yeah, that's all right. I'll just
This is just this is mainly just for.
Oh, we stalled. I think we're out of gas.